The arguments over the ICE shooting are raging on, and it's time to lay it to rest. Okay, so I'm going to do this in two parts on this video. First, we're going to end the arguments over what happened and who's at fault by showing you an evaluation video that was done by Nate the lawyer. And this video, guys, it's about to approach 1 million views. And in this video that he does, Nate asks the question,
is this murder or is it justified? Let's break it down.
Now, if you don't know who Nate the lawyer is, you need to check him out. I trust his insight. Okay, he is a lawyer. He is a former law enforcement officer, and he was also a prosecuting attorney or district attorney. So he has the background, and he does an excellent job looking at this entire case and giving key information. And one that I'm going to share with you here, he lays out these two Supreme Court cases that will erase any doubt about how they're going to probably handle this case, how it's going to play out. So I'll give you just a little 1 minute snippet here, and then you can hit the link in the description and watch the whole video that he did because it is outstanding. Okay, cut to the clip.
The Supreme Court said unless the person is a serious threat to the officer or other members in the community, then you can't just shoot them in the back or essentially commit executions on the street because the person's running away from you. And as you can see from the Justice Department's own website, it's called the fleeing felon rule. Next, we move to the case of Graham v. Connor in 1989. Now, in that case, if police are using force, that force is going to be judged by what the court says is known as the objectively reasonable standard. The objectively reasonable standard is an objective standard used to judge an officer's actions. Under the standard, a particular application of force must be judged through the perspective of a reasonable officer facing the same set of circumstances without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight and be based upon the totality of the facts that are known to that officer at the time the force was used. Now, under the objectively reasonable test for Graham v. Connor, the court gives us three factors that we should consider. Now, these aren't exclusive. There are many other factors that you can consider, but these are three the court points to in the case. One, the nature of the 911 call. Bank robbery, more likely you're going to use force versus cat stuck in a tree. Then you have whether the suspect is resisting arrest. More likely that you're going to be using force. And then last but not least, this is from Tennessee v. Garner. Remember, if the suspect is a serious threat to other officers or members of the community, then it would be objectively reasonable to use force to stop that threat. So now you know the law, and you're going to apply the law to the facts of this particular case.
All right, now that you've heard that, let's get a brief look at the latest video evidence. And I tell you what, guys, we can either accept it or we'll just agree to disagree, and that's it. We got to move on because I'm not going to waste any more time on it. So let's watch this video, and then we'll come back, and I'm going to give you three topics of discussion that go outside of this entire debate on whether or not the shooting was justified. And these are issues that are not to be ignored. So first, let's look at the latest video footage. Cut to the clip.
Now, here's a second angle from the front of the vehicle, so you can clearly see the officer is actually hit by the car.
Well, the slow down version is showing me that when the SUV pulls forward, they make contact with the agent in the street, and then immediately following that contact, you hear 3 gunshots follow.
So as CNN's expert has shown us, the officer was being struck by the vehicle and returned fire while the vehicle was literally hitting him.
Okay, so in my opinion, it's clear. She hit him. But like I said, you can either agree with that or we'll agree to disagree and move on. We're going to move on to 3 points of discussion. And I don't think you're going to be able to get beyond this. This is going to lay it to rest. So what are these 3 points of discussion that go beyond the he said, she said, and who's right and who's wrong? Well, the first point of discussion is this. Disobeying law enforcement has consequences. Now, there are several components of this particular case that you can't argue. First of all, this lady blocked a federal ICE operation when she parked her car lengthwise in the middle of a street, blocking a lane of travel. That's it. Now, next, she refused to get out of the car when she was commanded to get out. That was it. She was being arrested by that point, and she was resisting arrest. So it was her decision to refuse the orders of a law enforcement officer. And then to add insult to injury and to make the situation get even worse, her wife decided that it was necessary to taunt the officers, and then she gave the command for her to hit the gas and to speed off. Okay, so that not only put the wife's life in danger, which she lost, it didn't just put the law enforcement officer who fired the weapons' life in danger, but it also put innocent people, bystanders' lives in jeopardy. Now, what would have happened if someone was in the car that she hit after she was shot? What would have happened if somebody was in the street or on the sidewalk, or if that car would have flown into somebody's house? Would it have been fair that someone else's life would have been lost because of the decisions that she made? No, that's not arguable. All right, let's go to the second point of discussion. And in this point, I'm going to give you two irrefutable realizations. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. Okay, but the first irrefutable realization is the fact that ICE is a real law enforcement agency. I don't care what you hear and what the crazy lady, the officer from Pennsylvania, was it Philadelphia? I guess she's the head of the police department or sheriff's department. Well, whatever she is. And she claimed that ICE officers are fake. So we got this whole false narrative out there that ICE officers aren't real. They're just the Gestapo, or they're just pushing some political agenda. But in reality, the ICE agency has been around since immigration reform began, through multiple decades and surviving through multiple presidents' tenures. The ICE agency has been around, and they have been detaining and deporting illegal immigrants since its inception. They carry guns, and they are authorized to use force when necessary, and they are law enforcement officers. That's not even up for debate. That is what we must all realize before more people end up putting themselves in situations like this poor person did and ended up losing her life. Okay, the second irrefutable realization is this: immigration laws are there for a reason, and they're on the books. Okay, they're there. Now, I know that there's one political party, a particular party, that likes to use this phrase that they've just pounded, into people's ears over the years. And that phrase is, nobody is above the law. That's what they live by. They use that for all of their arguments fighting the other political party. But here's the thing. You can't say that nobody is above the law and then turn around and give a pass to 20 million people who are breaking the law. So if the law is on the books, the 20 million people who are not abiding by those laws, federal laws on the books, you can't sit there and make an argument that nobody is above the law. There's no argument with that, period. Okay, third point of discussion, and this is basically the bottom line. All right, this is the bottom line. We're at a point right now in history where we got to make a big choice, and it's an important choice. And there's a lot of people that are at fault for this situation, both political parties, and I'll explain that next. But the choice that we have to make is this. It's either going to be that we live in a country ruled by anarchy and vigilantism, or we can live in a country of legislative rule and change. In other words, when you have laws on the books that you disagree with, you go to the legislature and say, change this law. Or you exercise your right to vote, and you vote for someone that will change a law. That's the choice that we have to make. If we're going to have a sane future, a safe future, we have to make that decision. I don't want to live in a third world country that is ruled by anarchy. I want to live in a country where there is rule of law. So that is the choice that we have to make. But situations like what we see in Minneapolis, well, they're only going to continue unless we start giving consequences for blatant vigilantism. Now, the one thing that I can say in criticism of the party that's in control is the fact that we're allowing people to act as vigilantes without any recourse. Now, you might have 200 or 300 people out in the streets protesting, throwing rocks, throwing snowballs, throwing bottles, ramming ICE vehicles. And do you know that there have been several hundred instances of ICE vehicles being rammed? There have been several hundreds of instances of ICE vehicles being chased and traffic being blocked. Do you know that? Okay, so when are we going to start laying down rules? Okay, when is that going to happen? If we're going to allow people to do whatever the hell that they want to do, the next step is going to be people are going to do the same thing with police officers and with the highway patrol. It's going to happen. Well, let's say if you got somebody that believes that drinking and driving is not a serious crime. I mean, only maybe 2 or 3% of drunk drivers end up hitting and killing somebody. So, I mean, they're people too, and maybe they're stressed out or they just have a hard life. So those highway patrolmen shouldn't be out there arresting people for drunk driving. So when I see a highway patrolman on the side of the road about to arrest a drunk driver, or making them do a field sobriety test, I'm just going to roll right through and ram that highway patrolman's car because I think that he is persecuting that individual who is a drunk, who has a reason for being drunk because he's got a hard life. Now that sounds ridiculous, but mark my words, if we continue to allow all of the vigilantism and people out there just losing their minds protesting against federal operations, it's only going to get worse because there's no consequences being given. Now, that's not absolute. There are people who are caught on camera after the fact and they are arrested. You might have a protest going on where there's a couple hundred people and maybe 5 or 6 of the worst offenders are arrested on the spot. But the ICE officers don't have the human resources to handle arresting 100 people when they're blocking a street and throwing things and ramming vehicles and screaming at officers, telling them that we're going to track you down and end your lives. And we're going to find out who your kids are and end their lives. And we're coming for you. Yeah, they make those kind of threats and there's no consequences. But only a handful of people are arrested and put in jail and prosecuted for breaking the law. Now, the only other thing that's going on that I will give the party in control credit for, that it's not their fault, is that you've got these rogue judges out there who claim that the ICE officers are not allowed to have backup protection given by the National Guard. So they've told the president, you can't send in the National Guard to protect these ICE officers while they are arresting and detaining people here who are here illegally, some of which who have criminal backgrounds. Now, the actual choice that the president has to make right now that the party in control can use is to utilize the military, because that's what these judges have told them, that apparently they're supposed to use military troops before they use the National Guard. Did you know that? If you don't believe it, look it up, because that is what happened in Chicago and also in Seattle. So I think that we can end this here, and let's discuss those 3 points of discussion instead of arguing back and forth about whether or not the officer killed this lady or if he was acting in self-defense. Let's let that go. Discuss the 3 points. Post it in the comments right now. I'll be looking forward to hearing your thoughts. That's it.